So for Parshas Pinchas, I discuss a concept which is both familiar and foreign, simple but complex. The parsha begins, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, Heishiv es Chamasi, he did the right thing, he undid, calmed Hashem's anger from the Jewish people. There was going to be a terrible calamity that we would be dealing with, were it not for Pinchas jumping in to save the day. And Rashi points out that usually we don't identify people going back 3 generations. Pinchas, the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron HaKohen. And so Rashi tells us, Lefi shahayu hashvatim mevazim also, because the tribes were mocking Pinchas. Hari'isem ben Putizeh, did you see the son of the Puti? Shepite mavi imo agalim lavodis kechavim. His mother's father, who was Yisro, used to be someone who used to fatten animals for idols. V'harag nasi shevet mi Yisrael, and he feels somehow to be okay for him to kill the prince of a tribe of the Jewish people. So therefore, because this was what was being said, the Torah lists the genealogy of Pinchas, tells us that his father's father is the great Aaron HaKohen.
So Elazar married a daughter of Yisro?
Yeah.
So Elazar was also Moshe's brother-in-law.
That's right. Right. Which is a little simpler than Yaakov and Rivka and Lavan and Rachel and Leah, yeah. Right. So, what's interesting is that it doesn't sound like people were accusing Pinchas of any crime. They were making fun of him, which is a very strange thing. Making fun of someone for having done this. Either he did the right thing or he did the wrong thing. Where do we get to? And the way that they do it is such a strange way too. Just to mock someone, look, his grandfather was the world's greatest idol worshiper. Okay, that's a good way to mock someone. But then to finish with, and you kill a prince of the Jewish people? As if killing a prince of the Jewish people is somehow a more a lower, a more detestable act than killing any person. It's as if, if you'd have killed a regular Jew, okay, but you think you can kill a prince? Well, you committed a crime, and if you say you shouldn't have killed him, then you shouldn't have killed him. But the way that they're mocking him, there has to be some more information. We're missing some words in this interaction.
I thought I'm not disagreeing with your terminology of mocking, but wasn't the whole idea that Zimri came before Moshe Rabbeinu and said, look, can I marry a woman like this? Right. With the implication being, look, you married someone like right. that, and have relations with someone like that. And I understand that the Torah was given and that intervened, but I think that's what this is. So while it might be a form of mockery, it might also be sort of saying that the issue over which this occurred was something that you should have had more sensitivity over.
Why? I missed the point. Why should he be more sensitive over it?
Because he's the product of such a union himself.
Right, but more sensitive in the terms of what? He should not have done this?
He should not have done this.
None of those words are in Rashi. It doesn't say anywhere here that you could just read that into, well, you're a grandchild of Yisro himself. But they don't say that. They mention the fact that he was an idol worshiper. And that's the emphasis here. Your grandfather fattened calves for the idols, and you should do this. They didn't use in their words of their mockery, you you should not be complaining about marrying Midianites if you yourself, your mother's a Midianite.
Maybe, I don't know this for a fact, but maybe one of the issues is that it is detestable as what the Midianites did. They may not have been idol worshippers to the same extent. Or, the Midianites were, that's where Yitro was from, but Yitro was like their,
That's true. Again, they are certainly saying that. He's the leading idol worshiper.
Right.
But how is that relevant to what just happened? Again, if you're saying...
In other words, what Zimri did with Cosby was maybe not, it doesn't have the same, as bad a state, they are saying, as bad a status. Because
according to you, they're just saying you should know your grandfather was worse than what he did.
Yeah.
But that doesn't read into the words, at least the way Rashi is presenting it. You could add that into it, and you could read that into the first half. Look at this guy whose grandfather fattened calves for idol worship, and he should kill the prince. So we want something which connects those two, right?
Okay.
So, I think I'm missing a piece here, and maybe you can. You said that he came to Moshe and asked to marry Cosby?
He said, "What's the law?"
Well, the Gemara tells us that Zimri brought this woman and said to Moshe, "Is she permitted to me or prohibited?" So Moshe said, "Prohibited." So he said, "Well, didn't you marry a Midianite?"
Uh-huh.
So at that point, Moshe was silent. The truth is, Moshe married a Midianite before the giving of the Torah. She converted, all the other answers, but it wasn't the kind of thing that you respond to in a debate. This was not. And so Zimri just took her and did what he did, and then things were really bad.
So I always thought that, because I'm just reading, not with all the other commentary, I thought that what was going on was that there was just like open and public displays of
he was
honest public displays.
no, absolutely. And then Zimri went and made his point in a very public way, and no one did anything until Pinchas took the matter into his hands, or the spear.
So I thought that was the issue.
Right,
the public display.
No, it wasn't the public. I mean, we're going to break it down. We're going to discuss exactly what the issue was. But I'm just focusing in on the language that Rashi uses, which is, first of all, that they don't accuse him of anything, but that they mock him, and they say to him, "Do you see this son of an idol worshiper or grandson of an idol worshiper?" They didn't even use idol worship. The grandson of the one who fattened the calves for the idols, he should go and kill a prince? And that chain of argument is what requires explanation.
You're saying he's not in a position to judge.
Well, let's try to figure that out. Well, they didn't say that. They're mocking him. Let's break it down into more specifics. Okay, so going back to the original law, the Mishnah reads as follows: Hagonev es hakisva, someone who steals a vessel from the temple. V'hamekalel bekosem, and someone who curses in a certain way. We won't get into the specifics of it. V'haboel aramis, and a Jewish man who has relations with a Gentile woman. Those three cases, kanaim pogimbo. Someone who is zealous has the rights to kill that individual. Those are the three.
The Kalman kosem, that's somebody who's cursing.
It's a complicated case. Let's see the Mishnah there, Sanhedrin 81b, for the whole. Or we can discuss, but it's a complicated case. It's a type of cursing where you don't technically get the death penalty. It's a form of blasphemy. It's a form of blasphemy. It's a complicated case. But the case that we're focused on is the Haboel Haramis, one who has relations with a Gentile woman, a Jew has relations with a Gentile woman, a Kanaim Pogimbo. a kanoi, whatever that means, which we'll discuss that soon, hopefully, pogimbo are allowed to kill this man. Says the Gemara, Amar of Chista, Habali Malech. Someone who says, there's this situation going on there, what should I do about it? Ein morin lo. We do not tell him to kill. Because this is not a case where we can punish this person as being liable for the death penalty. This is only a case of kanaim pogimbo. The zealous can take matters into their own hands. Itmar nami amarabba babarachana amar Rabbi Yochanan. Habali malech emorlo. Someone who asks, we don't let him do it. Yes?
Does this have to be like a public, in-your-face display of this aberrant behavior?
It does
Or
not.
just somebody
It does not have to be, but it has to be in the act.
Oh.
Now listen to this. V'lo od. El she'impiresh Zimri v'hargo Pinchas narag alav. If Zimri had separated even for a moment, and Pinchas would have killed him while not in the act, narag alav, Pinchas would have been killed for killing an innocent person. The logic here is not there. It's just not there. If a person committed an act which somehow he's not liable for the death penalty by court, but a zealous person is allowed to, in the act, kill him, if during the process of him trying to kill him, somehow he's no longer in the act, then the kanai, this zealous person, he gets killed. Furthermore, Nepach Zimri v'hargul Pinchas. If Zimri would have turned around and killed Pinchas first, ein narag alav, Zimri would have been in the right. Shaharei rodefu, because Pinchas is pursuing him to kill him. How do we explain that? There's a person, if he kills me, he's okay, because I'm trying to kill him for not having committed any crime. He doesn't deserve the death penalty. So I'm allowed to kill him first. But if he kills me, then he doesn't get killed. It's a very strange in limbo case.
How does that compare to like a duel and done?
Ah, very good. Very good. That's the next point. We'll get to that next. Says okay, so what it sounds like from here, let's go to that Mishnah Lamelech now. I think that's says the Mishnah Lamelech. Mishnah Lamelech is a super commentary on the Rambam. And he's discussing the case of a Goel Adam that you just raised. And so he says, the halacha is, if person A sees someone chasing person B, or I should say, if someone sees person A chasing person B to kill them, what's the halacha with person A? You're allowed to kill them. Right? Does everyone... The halacha is that if someone is in the act of murder, you're allowed to kill the murderer. Even though you're killing one life to save another life, how do you get to choose who should live? But there is such a halacha, that if someone is trying to commit the act of murder, the Torah tells you that you're allowed to save the victim from the murder. Why?
You have to know the circumstances. Like, it could be that the victim actually had just stole something from another person and he was running after him, or he had just killed his wife and he was running after him. I mean,
Still, but if someone kills, you don't get to take vengeance. So if someone is pursuing someone else to kill them, there is never ever going to be a case, we'll see, there's never ever going to be a case where someone's running after someone else to kill them and they're allowed to do it. So if you see someone in the act of trying to kill someone else, you're allowed to kill that person.
Are you allowed to kill that person no matter what, or only if that's the only way to stop.
Oh, it's,
the murder.
absolutely, that's very clear. If there's any other way that you can stop him, then you actually get killed for killing him.
Uh-huh, okay.
Okay, the Gemara tells us the story that when Yoav killed Avner, and when Shlomo calls Yoav to court, he asks him, "Why did you kill Avner?" He said, "Because Avner killed my brother Amasa, and I'm a Goel Adam, I'm the redeemer of the blood." So he says to him, "But Avner only killed Amasa because Amasa was trying to kill Avner. So since Avner had only killed in self-defense, therefore you should not be able to avenge that blood." So he said, no, Avner did not kill in self-defense because Avner could have stopped my brother Amasa from trying to kill him by just maiming him, and instead he killed him in a way, or he stabbed him in a way where he would kill him. So he says, Shlomo, but maybe he had no choice, maybe. So he said no, because it was such an exact hit. He got in between like the third and fourth rib. Like he had this like perfect hit that he must have had the opportunity to aim. And therefore, if he had the opportunity to aim, he had the opportunity to maim. There's a Johnny Cochran for you. And
Not necessarily.
this is all part of the debate. And so therefore, since it was not self-defense, therefore he was a blood avenger, etc., etc. So you see that they are discussing this issue, that it's only self-defense if you can, and this is true in any case. If someone could defend themselves without killing, they have no right to defend themselves by killing. Okay, so says the Mishnah Lamelech, Nistapakti, I have the following question. Borotzeach bishgaga, someone who killed someone by accident. And now the redeemer of the blood, let's say the brother of the deceased, has the right to avenge the blood. If the accidental murderer, in self-defense, kills the redeemer of the blood, what's the law? Interesting question. So he says, I think it should be no worse than the case of Pinchas and Zimri. Just like in the case of Pinchas and Zimri, if Zimri would have turned around and killed Pinchas, Zimri would not have been punished. Why? Because Zimri wasn't really liable for the death penalty. It was just something that Pinchas took upon himself to kill Zimri. It's what we call a reshus. So Goel Adam, the redeemer of a blood, isn't required to kill the murderer. He's allowed to kill the murderer. So if it's not a requirement, but it's only allowed, then the person is allowed to defend himself and kill the redeemer of the blood first.
So you're allowed to do so, but it's at your own risk.
Right? Well, interesting, at least he's questioning this. He says, perhaps it should be so. Perhaps it should be that when we say the redeemer of the blood is allowed to kill the murderer, but you should know the murderer, who killed accidentally, I call him a murderer, but he's still a murderer, he is allowed to defend his life. So he says, however, if I see one person killing another person, and I kill the murderer, or at least I try to kill the murderer is not allowed to kill me. Because I am not choosing to kill him by my choice, but I'm obligated to kill the murderer, the soon-to-be or attempted murderer. And therefore, the murderer would not be allowed to kill me. In conclusion, what we're saying is that any time, even if someone's entitled to kill someone, but if he's not required to do it, but he only has permission granted, you should know that if it's only permission, then the other person still has permission to defend himself. If one is obligated to kill someone, then that person has no right to defend themselves, meaning if they do, they're going to get killed for committing murder. Which makes a very interesting point then, that what the Mishnah Lamelech is saying is that in the case of Pinchas and Zimri, it's not, when we say that the zealous person the zealous person kills him, it means they're allowed to kill. It's an option, it's a choice, it's not a requirement. And therefore, even though they're doing a mitzvah if they do it, but it's their choice to undertake this, and as I think someone said, it's at your own risk. It's at your own risk because you really are not empowered by the force of the mitzvah to be allowed to kill.
What's that status? Is it a mitzvah to do it?
It's what we call a reshus.
But is it a mitzvah?
Well, if you do it, it might be a mitzvah. But
If you do it, it's on the positive.
right, it is a mitzvah if you do it, but it's a mitzvah which you are volunteering for.
And are not obligated, so it's not.
You're not obligated, but if you do it, it is a mitzvah. Right? So it would be no different than if you go put yourself in a position to do a mitzvah.
But what is the requirement to be considered a zealous person?
Well, hopefully we'll get to that. Yes.
Okay, somebody is driving, some old guy pops in the street, kill the old guy, it is accident. The police come and say it was accident, give him the license back. Just there's no case or anything. But in Shamayim, they pick this driver out of 7 billion people to do this act, right?
Right.
Because this guy had something in his folder, his case. Now, here what we are talking about, is it possible the guy who is come to this position to make a decision, should I kill or not to kill, in the case of somebody's chasing somebody else, that this guy, it is indirectly a punishment for him?
Well, that might be. It's not our discussion. It might be that when these kinds of things happen, that they work with another system, which is a discussion of things happen to straighten themselves out, so to speak. The equivalent, as we've discussed, the true meaning of what karma, the way karma really works. Maybe that's why it was a car. That,
And it hit a dog.
The karma hit a dogma, yeah. But that is a separate topic, though. It leads off into a whole separate discussion. Now, the Rambam, in the way he codifies this rule, Kol haboel aramis, if a Jewish man has relations with a Gentile woman, bein derech chasnos, whether it's in the form of marriage, bein derech znus, or it's just cohabitation.
How could it be in the form of marriage? I thought there is no condition.
Meaning, as he said, in the form of marriage. If he's not doing it as an immoral act. He's saying, "This is my wife." Even though you're trying to present it as a more legitimate, right? So in Bala B'Farhesia, if it's a public event. So that's what you were asking before. If there are at least 10 Jews present while this is going on, if a zealous person catches him and kills him, Harei elu meshubachin uzrizin, that is praiseworthy and that is alacrid. That is someone stepping up and doing the right thing. That's the person who we should all be looking up to. That's the praiseworthy person. That's the way the Rambam.
Rishus. I mean, it doesn't sound like, this is just permissible. It sounds like, wow, you do it, you get big time brownie points.
It doesn't sound like you have to do it.
You don't have to, but it's more than just like, okay, you're there, you want to do it, go ahead. That's kind of what you made it sound like before. Like, you want to do it, go
It
ahead.
sounds more like you're going above and beyond.
Right, that sounds.
So it's not really required at all?
But it's very praiseworthy.
Is the part of the issue in that
Yes.
situation the number of people observing?
Well, yeah, absolutely. You need that part. But I think what everyone's saying is right, is that it sounds like from this, that it's a very nice thing to have done, but who asked you necessarily to do it?
No, Hashem's not going to require you to do something like that, to pick up and kill somebody at that moment, because they might turn around and kill you. But.
Well, I don't know if you need
But it's a
because
very
they might turn around and kill you.
Okay, you don't need that, but it's a very honored and praiseworthy thing to do.
But only if
Just
you're a
for
zealous.
Hashem's-
Right?
But
No,
only
no,
if you're a
absolutely.
zealous person. And
Well,
that's
we'll get to the definition of
that's
zealous in a
required.
minute. But there is the opinion of Rashi. See if I can find this. Here it is. The Rashi says, "Rak b'shah sheroin es hamasa." It has to be that while they're still in the act. Aval la'achar mikain ein misaso mesura lebeistin. After the act is ended, he's no longer really liable for the death penalty because it's not. There's no beistin anymore. It's a very strange language for this, because there's no basin involved here anyway. So therefore, most of the commentaries read in Rashi that what Rashi is saying is that if you catch him in the act, you represent the basin, and you are the judge, the witness, the judge, and the executioner. Which some take to mean that Rashi is learning that there's actually an obligation for one who is zealous. Again, we'll get to the definition of zealous in a minute. But if one is zealous, then one is obligated to do so.
But for capital punishment, you need more than one witness.
Right. But in this case, as we said,
And
the
you need to
witness,
warn the
witness,
person.
judge, executioner, absolutely. This is an exception to all those rules. But it is an obligation. And we find there are exceptions there's an exception to every rule. And this is this exception. But the way Rashi seems to learn is that it's an actual obligation.
But just following the same, doesn't, before a court can execute somebody, doesn't there have to be a finding that the person was warned?
Yeah, that's the same question. There's a whole system of laws that are required. This is an exception to that system. This is all the details
Even
of
if you
it.
said-
Every detail of it. The fact that you can put someone to death without warning, without witnesses, without real judges, the person just executes them. This is a strange rule that doesn't fit into the rest of the law system, but this is an exception. And not just this, but the other two, whatever those cases are also an exception. There's actually a fourth case to
So
it.
And you said there had to be 10 witnesses.
No, it has to be that this is a public display,
And a public
but they're
display
not
is 10.
witnesses.
All right, but there's 10 people who've witnessed.
Right, but that's just the details for what makes the case a case of Boel Aramis. But assuming that that's the case, then that person could just go and kill him.
So now, how often is it going to happen that people are going to be engaging in an intimate physical relationship in front of 10 people?
Once.
But I mean, this is not something that is likely ever really to
Right,
happen.
but that's true.
Except in
It happened
instant, yeah, it happened
Yes.
once, right.
That absolutely, that is true. But the way the Torah is set up is in order, many of the things don't ever happen. Ben Sora Mora, which parents are going to bring their 13-year-old son to be executed in court. But the Gemara says, this is meant to teach you the proper relationships and the proper behaviors and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate and hashkafa and all the other things. And that's what we learn from it. So we're not worried about whether it happens or not. The point is that this halacha does exist. And it is a strange halacha, and it's a strange exception to the rules. As Dr. Abbasid just said, well, what happened to witnesses? And then it's an exception, yeah.
So if you're going to have such an exception where all these safeguards, what you would call in secular law due process, where all of this is basically eviscerated, who is the zealous person?
Okay, let's get to that now. So says the Margalis Hayam,
Let's see.
Davar kazeh, since it uses the word kanaim, pogimbo, and the way the Rambam says it, im pagubo kanaim, meaning if a kanai chooses to do so, it's got to be Adam asher bekal archos chayav kanai. It has to be that someone who, in terms of everything, is a zealot, v'naki me'avak chet, and is free from even the dust of sin. Furthermore, he says, Meduber ba'adam, we're referring to a person, shebekol taluchosav bekodesh, or in all aspects of holiness, kanai, he is a zealous person. Where we can be sure that this act was done purely for the sake of heaven.
So Pinchas is about the only one,
Right,
correct?
that's right. That's right. So what we have here is not just a strange case, but even the person who's going to do this act has to be exactly the kind of person who is free of any personal feelings in the situation, someone who isn't just standing up in the act and choosing to make himself so, but someone who is just the right person, someone who's a holy person, who doesn't even have, careful with the words here, the dust of sin upon him.
So that would be the reason that the person is praiseworthy, not because they committed the murder.
No, the Rambam doesn't say that. The Rambam says that this is a praiseworthy act because this is a big Kiddush Hashem, and and the person risked their life in order to make this point. They're praiseworthy for other reasons too, but the Rambam is very clear you get praised for this. But it's a very specific kind of person, that's for sure.
Why you use word Adam, not Ish?
He just uses the word other. I don't know if that's necessarily the difference.
I thought if you use Adam, right, it could be, honestly, a woman could be part of this too.
Well, yeah, a woman could be a kanoi. Why not? Now, I'll tell you that when I was in yeshiva, we went to Masada. So we went up and we had a minyan in the morning at the top of Masada, in the base medrash of Masada. We had a minyan shachris there. It was quite the experience. But in the middle of Chazaras Hashatz, this tour guide comes in and starts, it's an open roof, there's no ceiling. This tour guide comes in and starts talking about this is the synagogue, in the middle of Chazaras Hashatz. So the Chazan, the Shliach Tzibur, is getting annoyed, so he raises his voice. So the tour guide raises his voice. So the Chazan raises his voice. And the tour guide is getting annoyed that the Chazan is reciting and everyone's saying Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, and Amen. And he says to his group, he says, let's go to the next room, we'll come back later. Once zealots, always zealots. That's what he said. Okay, wonderful. So what we're saying is that here you need a specific kind of person, you need a zealot. Says the Chafetz Chaim, and this is where, when we talk about, what lessons can we learn from this in practical life, says the Chafetz Chaim. A person, this is in Shmiras HaLashon, the Chafetz Chaim is talking about talking Lashon Hara. A person should know, when a person talks Lashon Hara about someone else, in heaven, that person enters the courthouse, and they judge that person, whether he himself is free of that particular accusation. He says, there's a teaching of the Smak, the Sefer Mitzvos Katon, who says that even when you are supposed to kill someone, such as someone who's in the act of murder, someone who is in the act of certain immoral acts where you're allowed to kill that person, you should know that if somebody takes it upon themselves to kill, to protect a life, in other words, you see someone trying to kill someone and you step in and push them off the cliff first, you should know that you need to spend the rest of your life avoiding committing such a sin. For if, God forbid, the person who did this killing to save a life will stumble in that area, he will retroactively have spilled innocent blood. He said the Gemara tells us that Yehu was punished for what he did to the house of Achav. Even though the house of Achav were all idol worshippers, and Yehu actually did a mitzvah by killing all these idol worshippers. However, because Yehu later in his life himself turned to idol worship, he retroactively had no right to kill someone. He says, even though he did a big mitzvah. He says this is true of every interaction between man and fellow man. If you punish someone with physical violence, or shaming them, or even speaking lashon hara of them, even if you are right. But if ever in your life you've done something like that, or if in the future you ever commit something like that, then you are retroactively invalidated from being allowed to do what you did.
Does this hold true for judges?
Why not? He says, therefore, if you choose to be the one who is the witness, the one who comes to testify about someone, or someone who causes someone pain, even though you're right, ask yourself, the Chafetz Chaim, ask yourself, is it worth it? If you see somebody stealing money in the business, that's an example. So you want to say something to the boss, you want to tell the authorities, I saw this person pocket some cash, and you feel like it's the right thing to do. Is it the right thing to do?
Yes.
Everyone agrees it's the right thing to do? Someone's taking money on the side, pocketing it, right thing to do. Says the Chafetz Chaim, you might be right. You probably are right. But you should know that you're only right as long as you keep yourself clean from this.
But doesn't it say in the Torah that you have to do that? If you've seen something, that you have to come up as a witness and
Yes.
So,
But
how does that? So how can the Chafetz Chaim said you should think twice about it? The Torah says you have to.
It doesn't say you should be afraid. You should be afraid. You might still have to do it because it's the right thing to do. But you should be very afraid because you should know that from now on, that's something which the rest of your life you're on watch for.
Well, that sounds like you shouldn't do it. It sounds like he's saying you shouldn't think twice or don't be the witness. That's what it sounds like to me when he says.
Okay? The Gemara brings a long he brings a long story from the Gemara in Yevamos where something like this basically happened. He says, Klal Hadavarim, basically what I'm saying is like this. A person should get himself accustomed to be of the ones who promote good and not the ones who promote evil, and try to help people and to cover for people. And if you see that there's a reason to be angry about someone, try to make reasons and excuses because it's worth it for you. But if you do evil with others, and worse yet, if you rejoice over their downfall, so if you yourself become guilty of it, you will yourself suffer. And therefore he goes on to say, a person should never be happy when someone else falls, etc., etc.
So I have a question. Let's say, using the stealing from a business example, because I can't remember who it was who said this, but it was from a different shir or book or something, that when you see something happen, you're coming into the middle of the story, no matter how much you think you know. You don't really know what came before, you don't know what's going to come after. So let's say you see someone taking money from their employer. And maybe the employer is very wealthy, and maybe this person is very poor, and taking the money isn't right, even so. But maybe that person has every intent of giving the money back. So is the Chafetz Chaim saying to give the person the benefit of the doubt because there's really no harm, let's say? No harm done necessarily in every situation?
He doesn't say that. He say that might be one of the options you might have to consider. Because again, what are your options? Let's say someone is in a business, a restaurant business, and someone, pays $20 for their food, and you as a fellow employee watch that employee put $10 in the cash register and $10 in their pocket. Stealthily, in a way where it looks like they're just pocketing the money. No one will ever figure it out. No one's going to know after a whole night of business where the $10 went. And for all you know, that person might be doing the right thing. For all you know, that person has a deal with the boss. He says to the boss, I can't afford to go to work every day. It's costing me too much in gas. And the boss says, well, why don't you take $10 from just take $10 from the register every day. Now, the boss might be doing something wrong because he's supposed to report that $10 to taxes and whatever. But the point is, that act that you see might not be an act of stealing at all.
Right.
That's certainly true. But if that's an option, then we're getting into the question of how to be down people, l'kav schos and l'kav chova, which was something which we discussed earlier in the year. That's something which we do have to consider. But we're saying, assuming you've gone past that point, you went over to this person and said, what's the story? I saw you take $10. He's like,
Maybe he's too embarrassed.
I don't think I'm getting paid enough. It might be, but assuming that you know the case, assuming that you figured it out, assuming that you see that person is falsifying papers and information, assuming that you've got, so now it becomes seemingly, I think most people would say it is your job. It might be your job, but from now on you can never ever
do that
same thing, because
Well, we
then
shouldn't be doing it anyhow.
right, but now you'll be punished twofold. You'll be punished, one for doing it, and one for getting someone else to suffer because of it. Which is strange because just because I steal doesn't mean I shouldn't stop someone else from stealing, right? I mean, if I'm a murderer and I kill 3 people every day, and then I see someone else trying to kill, I should still have the mitzvah to save a life, right? But we're saying that no, somehow you don't have that mitzvah.
Really, honestly, you're saying that if someone who happens to be a murderer sees someone else about to murder someone, and for whatever reason they want to save that person's life, it's not a mitzvah?
No, they do, but they're going to get punished for it. I'm just repeating to you what it says.
Is that opinion just the Chofetz Chaim's opinion, or is that everyone's? Is that general?
Well, I'm find the second source. The Sefer Hasidim. Sefer Hasidim is an old sefer, nothing to do with the modern day Hasidim. He says, if you have someone who is not a major sinner, is not someone who's causing people to sin, but he bothers you, you should daven for Hashem that he should save you and that you should make peace with him. However, if that doesn't work, and the only way that you can, if someone's doing bad things to you, and you want to daven that person should make peace with you, and it's not working, and basically you have to daven that person should be punished. You should know that for the rest of your life, you're going to be punished by having someone else suffer through you. Which means like this. Kanaim pogimbo. When we talk about zealous people have the right to step forward and do something, there's a certain type of person who's entitled to take that step. If you are truly free, and I don't mean in the Christian form of he who is free of sin cast the first stone, because there what they're saying is that you have to be free of all sin in order to cast the stone. That's not what we're saying here. What we're saying is that you, in order for you to step forward, you have to fix yourself. You have to take on the responsibility that you yourself are free from this. If you are the vehicle for punishment for something, you've got to be free of that crime. So if it means, that's what I'm saying, if someone is a murderer, and they see someone else killing someone, and they want to save a life, they need to, if they want to justify saving a life, they need to stop killing. And the continued killing is going to make them punished twofold. For killing, and for daring to be the one to kill someone else who's killing. And the same thing is true every single time you call someone out on something. And so the Chofetz Chaim says, certainly when you talk Lashon Hara about someone. When you talk Lashon Hara about someone, what are you're saying to someone else, did you hear what that person did? That person, in the middle of shul, got up and did this, and then went an embarrassment to the shul, and they spoke disrespectfully to another person. So then you are calling judgment on that person through your words. If you yourself are not better in that area, that's a very dangerous thing to do. coming back to the story of Pinchas. Yes.
Can I just ask one more question? Or
Sure.
do you wanna- Does that mean the person who hasn't freed themselves of that particular fault is not allowed to do it? Or again, they're doing it at their own risk?
It sounds like they're still allowed to do it. You see, the language is a little vague, but they're going to get punished for it. So I'm not sure what should they do. That's still unclear. But one might say that maybe they shouldn't. It's just very hard to imagine, as you asked, that if someone is guilty of murder, that they're not allowed to save a life because of that. It's very strange to me to hear. But that does sound like where they're going with it. They didn't use the example of murder, so I don't want to quite go that far.
Oh.
But certainly, if I'm stealing, then I can't be the one to call someone out for stealing. Just don't do it. Let it go. Might be worth it. Just letting it go, let that person steal, even though you're not doing them a favor, you're not doing the business a favor. But if you're guilty of that too, maybe it's not worth being the agent
But if
for.
you know that something is going on that's wrong, and you have the ability to stop it, and you don't you then become an accessory to that crime as well?
Possibly. It depends on the case. But it depends on whether it's an ongoing thing or it's just a one-time thing. Yes. I'm raising this only because it's so surprising that the more surprising it is, I think the better my point is. So yeah, this is kind of strange. But certainly in our case, the Chafetz Chaim's case, which is a case where I think it's clear to everyone that it's like that, is to call someone out on something, to challenge someone in an area where you yourself are not so great, and people love to do that because the people will tell us, oh yeah, well what about what you did last week? And what will people's response? Well, two wrongs don't make a right. Well, in this case, the other person might be right. They might be right. You have no right to bring this up to me or call me out on it if you yourself are guilty of it.
Does it make a difference if, let's say you steal and you keep telling yourself, well, this isn't so bad, I'm not stealing that much, and then you see someone else steal, and either, number one, you're stealing more, or it's a more severe situation, or number two, it suddenly dawns on you through this situation how bad it is, you stop the person, or you see that they are brought to justice, and then you stop stealing. Is that a different situation?
Well, I would think so. I would think so because there, if a person does tshuva, a person who does tshuva is free of that sin, assuming that you do a proper teshuvah.
Right.
So if someone sees an act of murder and realizes, my whole life, I didn't realize how bad murder is, and now I get it, he had an epiphany, so then that might be different.
Did it actually say that they had to be doing the same sin or that they had to be free of sin? I mean, in other words, any sin.
Well, it sounds like they free of that sin. That's the language of the Chafetz Chaim. Get the exact word that he uses.
Because a kanai is free of all sin.
שצריך ליזור אחר כך מאבק שלהם. You should avoid even the dust of those sins. So anything within that area. So let's say you're not necessarily stealing from the business, but you do walk into a grocery shop and eat grapes while you're shopping, and not just to taste them, which might be permitted, but you feel like they're offering snacks, and so that's stealing. Or let's say you go into do anything more than window shopping, which is like this. Like if you go into a store, you don't plan on buying it. You just ask information and get the guy excited as if he's going to make a sale and then leave, which is a kind of stealing. So even though that's like so not stealing, it's just barely. It's still, if you're going to call someone out for big stealing, you can't even do small stealing.
What happens,
theft.
what happens if there's a court case and they have one witness for something? Whether it be stealing or killing or whatever, and you are a witness, you are another witness, but you're not so as far as whatever it is that they're doing. I mean, you've also.
So there you might have a separate mitzvah to testify, which is I think what you mentioned earlier.
Right.
There that might be different, because where you're halachically bound to do something, you might have to do what you're halachically supposed to do. There you don't have an option in the
But I
matter.
would say that you're halachically bound to testify even if there's not a court case already going. If there's something that's happening, isn't it lo titalem, don't hide yourself, don't.
Right, yeah, if someone's losing money, that might be true. And again, like you said, sometimes you might have to do it, but you're still going to get punished for it. And in each case is different. It depends on what exactly you're doing. You might not even be fixing the situation by calling out the person.
It just seems so funny to me that these people these rabbanim would be saying that you're supposed to not do it when the Torah says to do it.
Well, the key isn't that you shouldn't do it. The key is that from then on you should fix yourself in this area. That's really where the Chafetz Chaim is going.
Point. That's what they
Right.
want you to do. But if you don't do it, then they're saying you're going to be doubly punished.
Right,
I mean, it's just,
right, and therefore your option, because you have to do it, you're either going to be doubly punished or fix yourself. That's what he's saying. So just to finish off, what we're saying by Pinchas is that we have a new explanation here. Pinchas did what he did under the assumption that he is a kanoi. So Pinchas, there's no way that they can punish him. They're not accusing him of anything. They're claiming, they're mocking him by saying, do you really feel that you are in this place, that you are the appropriate zealot? Because do you realize what that means? That means that you have to be free. And notice they don't say so much that he worshipped idols, your grandfather worshipped idols, but your grandfather was the one who fattened the calves for the idols. Suggesting some type of indulgent, type of fancy sinner, if I could use that word, suggesting that he was somehow a person who was more elaborate in his sin, his grandfather. And so they're mocking him. Now remember, Zimri is a Nasi b'Yisrael. And as you mentioned, Zimri was even coming with a calculation of why he was doing what he was doing. He presented this as a case, as an argument. And therefore, for Pinchas to be able to see past this Jewish leader, he would actually have to consider himself to be more spiritually clean than that person. So what we're talking here is in order for Pinchas to be allowed to do so, it wasn't just a halachic ruling, it's an undertaking. It's a reshus. It is a voluntary choice of Pinchas to go ahead and do this. And for Pinchas to do this, what he's saying about himself was that he is better than Zimri. And that's where this comparison of your grandfather and him being a prince, they are mocking him because of his ego, but more so his delusion. Because he's right. He did the right thing, and without question, halachically he did. They're not questioning him halachically. They're just saying you should know, you realize the position that puts you in.
He wasn't qualified, let's say, in saying that?
Well, even if he was sort of, mostly, kind of, but when you put yourself in that position, all the rules change. Now you need to be so accountable in this area that you have put yourself in a very dangerous situation, because now you're going to be called out for every small thing. And as a sign of that, we're calling you out for every small thing. What about your grandfather? What about the influence that might have on you? And so the Torah says, where do we have a person who is completely selfless? The most selfless person we can think of in the Torah is Aaron. As the Torah tells us, that Moshe said, how am I going to lead the Jewish people when I have a brother who's more fitting than I. And Hashem says, V'racha b'samach b'libech, that Aaron had such joy in his heart. He was completely selfless. And throughout the Torah, Aaron risks his life for the sake of the Jewish people by the Egel. Aaron represents one, I wish we had more time to discuss this, as someone being selfless. The Torah says, no, you don't understand. Pinchas is on that level. And the Medrash tells us that Pinchas is Eliyahu, Hanavi, who is also known as the most zealous of all. The Gemara tells us that there was one sage who once gave a lecture about how zealous Eliyahu was. So Eliyahu used to come visit him, but then he stopped visiting him. So after a while he came to visit him. He said to him, "Why didn't you come visit me?" He said, "Well, you accused me of being zealous." And he says, case in point, that you didn't show up to learn with me because you didn't like that statement. Pinchas is going to remain that zealous one who's going to constantly be the zealous one who is coming for the right reason. He remains free of sin and ascends to heaven while in a lifetime. The story of Pinchas is for us the story of if you do see something wrong and you do feel you need to fix it, make sure that you are better than that. If you want to talk negatively about someone, make sure first that you are better than that. And if you're not, fix yourself and then worry about other people. Otherwise, it's at your own risk. Good.